Are anxious thoughts stopping you? Are they really holding you back in your life? Watch today's video. We're going to talk about different ways to handle your anxious thoughts specifically. Hey there, my name is Diana Garcia. I'm a licensed therapist in Florida and owner of a private practice called Nurturing Minds Counseling. Hit that subscribe button now to get more tips to handling your anxiety, self-esteem, improve your relationships, things like that. All right, let's jump into this week's video. This is part of my Decoding Anxiety playlist. You can check it out here. I've been wanting to really share information about anxiety, like psychoeducation, things I tell my clients, and ultimately give you the tools and skills you need to move through your anxiety so it stops controlling your life in ways that are unhelpful for you. So for today's video, I'm really going to be focusing more on handling anxious thoughts. So in the last video, at the end of the last video, I had encouraged you to really kind of start to log your anxiety. So really noticing when it shows up, like what was the situation? Was there like a pretty clear trigger? And what was showing up for you internally, right? So what was showing up in your mind? What were the feelings, the physical sensations, how you responded, how it worked for you, the impact it had, and any other notes you wanted to do. So I really have a lot of my clients do this, especially if this is their first time in therapy, because it's both helpful for them to understand their anxiety and common cues and patterns, but it's also really helpful for me because then I'm going to get a better understanding. Okay, what is it about these difficulties that bring on these moments of anxieties for my client? Like, what are the common fears that show up? What are the common avoidance mechanisms? What do they do in those moments when it feels really hard? What's the cost? And so I want you to start to have that. So hopefully you did start to track some of that data for yourself. So you start to kind of pull back the covers on your anxiety. So in that log, what's helpful is for you to start to, for this video, focus on the anxious thoughts, right? So something happened, and honestly, in some instances, maybe a thought is what starts the anxiety spiral, right? But either way, I want you then to stay with that thought component and think, was there a specific thought that started you off to go into worst case scenario and then cause you to feel uncertain? Was there a situation that you had interpretation that then caused you to have a hard time moving through it? Did you have a physical sensation, right? Your heart started beating faster and you didn't know why, very common in like panic disorder, panic attacks, and your mind said, uh-oh, something's wrong. I have to go to the ER. I'm having a heart attack, right? Or whatever the case is. And so that escalated your anxiety. So I want you to start to just look at what those common thoughts are. And before we even jump into like a tool or a way to start to shift the way you look at your anxiety, I want you to just maybe reflect on a couple different things. So the first reflection question is like, are there any themes that are showing up for you? So if you did the log from the last video, or if you didn't, just take a moment to think about your anxiety in the last 2 weeks to a month. Think about any moments that it was pretty prominent that you can pick out, and think about like, are there any common themes that are showing up, right? Like every single time you have a meeting scheduled with your boss, that's when your anxiety goes up. Or every single time that your heart races, that's when you have a really hard time. Like ultimately just helpful for you to start to pick out certain patterns and themes that are apparent to you. And then specifically with the thoughts, I want you to start to ask yourself, like, is there a core fear here? Like if you were to look at, even if there's different situations that show up, and there might be more than one core fear, but can you notice that there's commonalities, right? So if you really struggle with social anxiety, like is there a core fear of being judged harshly, being rejected, whatever the case is, I want you to start to see and ask yourself, like, what is it that I'm ultimately afraid of in this moment? And I want you not to just do it at the surface level. Like sometimes, like I want you to dig, right? So a really helpful way to dig is to just keep asking yourself, okay, well, what if that happens? And what if that happens, right? Like, and I've done that with clients, right? So if it is, oh my gosh, I'm anxious that I'm having this meeting with this person. Okay. And what are you anxious is going to happen? That they're going to scold me, or they're going to be rude or criticize me, whatever the case is. Okay. And what if that happens? Oh my gosh, that would be so difficult because then I would start to get really anxious. I couldn't deal with it. Okay. And then what would happen? Well, they would know, and then they would think I'm such a loser. And then what would happen? Right. So like, I want you to keep digging until you get to this like core fear of like, okay, I'm afraid that they're going to perceive me as a loser, or I'm going to lose my job, or I'm going to be homeless, right? Whatever the case is, like, I just want you to start to dig so that you start to understand. The next question that I want you to ask yourself is, what is this experience telling me is important to me here, right? What is this painful moment indicating as a clue or signaling that there's a value here hidden that I have to look for? Because if we think about the core fear that you just identified, right, whatever that fear is, I'm afraid of rejection, abandonment, whatever the case is, the flip side to that is that it's indicating that that's important to you, connection, security. There's something there. There's like, it's signaling a beacon that, hey, this is a value of yours. And when you have that frame and start looking at your pain in that way, it's helpful to know, like, oh, this is just an indication that something's important to me here. And it can also serve as some type of motivation to help you keep moving forward, even when you're really scared, right? Because when things are important to us, it's like, are we willing to feel these difficult things in the service of moving towards this value, this important thing for me? Comment below any reflections that you notice after you answer these questions for yourself, right? When you think about any themes, or if you think about the core fear, or if you think about like the value, comment below anything that showed up for you. So now I want to talk about this concept of how do you start to treat your thoughts differently, especially your anxious thoughts, whether it's this core fear that you identified or even any other anxious thoughts that show up before that. So we've talked a lot before in the last video that you actually don't have that much control in making these thoughts go away, but we can learn to respond differently to them. So sometimes I'll give the example. It's almost like when we get really stuck with this anxious thoughts, it's like metal is fused, right? It's just like really stuck, and we're just trying to create a little bit more space so that you can learn how to respond differently, right? So you can start to notice those thoughts and then make very intentional decisions about how you want to respond. The concept that I'm talking about here, it's this concept of what we like to call fusion or diffusion, right? So when we say someone's fused, it really like fused to this thought and they can't even notice that they're getting so hooked by this thought. Versus diffusion is when we have a little bit more space. We can start to see thoughts like, oh, this is the thought, and I get to choose like where I want to look or how I want to respond to that thought. I'm going to go through 3 different types of strategies that you can do. So one way to think about this to create a little bit more space from certain thoughts. So let's say we identified this core fear of I'm going to die. And that's the thought that really, when we have the thought, we're really hooked by it. We have a hard time creating any space or responding differently to this thought. And again, if we think about like our goal is to create a little bit of space, we're not trying to get rid of this thought. We're just trying to start to see like a thought's a thought. That's just symbols in this language that we call English. But if we were to think about this in a different language like Hindu, it's different symbols, right? And it sounds
मैं
like
मरने जा रहा हूँ.
this, and this probably doesn't cause the same reaction as this. Maybe when you see it this way, you have no reaction except maybe confusion if you don't understand the language. Again, let's see if it was in Bosnian.
Umriyetçu.
Right? Do you have the same reaction, or are you able to just notice that these are literally just characters and symbols in a certain language, right? And in the same token, so are these. These are characters and symbols in one language, and we're the one that are giving it more meaning than we have to, especially in a moment where it might not even be helpful. Another way to start to think about it is this game called Thought Bingo. So what I'm going to want you to do is you're actually going to pause this, have a piece of paper ready, available. But ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to think about a difficult situation for you. Maybe even think about something you logged or something you thought about where your anxiety showed up. It's something that's important to you, right? So someone invited you to a get together and that triggered anxiety. So I just want you to imagine picturing yourself actually going to that event. And when you imagine picturing yourself going to that event and you really kind of think about it and think about you being there and everything that comes up, then I want you to pull up, you can see here from the screen, this thought bingo. And as you think about that, I want you to pause the video, take a screenshot of this, or just have, kind of make your own informally. And I want you to circle each time you notice that you're doing one of these, right? So you're starting to like label these types of thoughts, right? So if you're deciding something, you're judging something, you're arguing with yourself, you're comparing, right? I want you just to notice that and start to circle it. So give yourself a couple minutes to do that. So what did you notice, right? Was there certain positive thoughts that showed up that felt easier to have? Were there certain negative thoughts that pulled you or hooked you and you felt like you had to resolve them, or you started thinking about them over and over? Did you notice that you had way more judging thoughts? Again, just sort of notice this and really think about like this exercise is just for you to start to become aware of the process of your thinking and kind of like the machinations of your mind and what it's doing, and not getting so caught up in the content of your thoughts. There is no right or wrong answer here. This next one is really about like a helpful way to view it as like your thoughts are like thoughts in a suggestion box. So if you've ever been to like a restaurant or a business where they have like a suggestion box for you to leave feedback or suggestions for improvement, you can start to treat your anxious thoughts exactly like that, like suggestions. And for some reason, this makes me think of the episode of The Office where Michael takes out the suggestion box and starts to read through them. And in that, you can clearly see he like doesn't really take most of them seriously, right? And so you want to start to have that same kind of reference of looking at these anxious thoughts of like, I'm going to die. I'm going to be rejected. I can't handle things. These are all suggestions that are generated by your suggestion box, your mind. And you get to really decide like, do you want to listen to this recommendation or suggestion, or do you just want to acknowledge it and let it be? You can also add to this by it really like once you see whatever the suggestion is, you can genuinely, and I say genuinely, like thank your mind for that suggestion. Like, thank you, mind, for that. I hear you. And I'm going to choose to do something different if it's not workable. And the reason I say thank your mind, it's because if we go back to like the beginning of this series, we talked about ultimately the function of anxiety is to try to keep you safe and protect you. It just doesn't always go about it the right way. It goes a little haywire. And so if you understand that the intent is positive or helpful from your anxious mind, it's just not workable. So you want to thank your mind, like you noticed it, you got it, but you're going to choose to do something different with that thought. Thumbs up now to let me know that you're going to try and practice one of these different skills, or even if just the concept of fusion or diffusion is helpful for you and starting to shift the way you look at your anxious thoughts. Because it's really important. This is a skill that you're going to practice. Of course, you're still going to get hooked by thoughts. We all still get hooked by thoughts. That's just the way our minds work. But the more you can start to notice and label that and create just a little bit of a pause or a space, the more you're going to be better equipped to deal with your anxiety in those moments. I hope this was helpful for you. And like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks.